episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. I probably forgot to say that the channel actually hit the 2K subscribers mark before the end of the year, so that was really cool, and obviously I'm very grateful to everybody that has subscribed to my channel, and well, hopefully we'll carry on having some fun throughout out the course of this year, and well, I think I've got some I've got some interesting tastings lined up. I've got, as you well know, little sort of groups of bottles dotted all around the place, just waiting for an opportunity to taste them. So, anyway, I mean, last week it was good fun to do a cognac and an Armagnac episode of the show, but this week we're back to whiskey, and I thought it would be nice to take a look at some samples from the independent bottling company James Eadie that came my way just before Christmas. As you well know, I've done a number of episodes on their releases over the last few years, and they seem to be, very popular with you guys, the buying public. And I like to think that they've been pretty consistent in the quality of what they've released. I mean, yes, like every independent bottling company, there's been some high points and there's been some less than high points, should we say, but I think overall I've been really impressed by the quality of what they've released, and they kindly sent me a selection of samples from releases from last year that I didn't get the opportunity to taste last year, so not really a great deal else to say apart from let's just dive in and take a look at today's lineup. Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with the first of the small batch bottlings. This is a 9-year-old Benrinnes, and a bottle of 46%, and they've called it the Eagle. Now, eagle-eyed viewers, yeah, I know, that was a bad one, may have spotted that the small batch labels now feature a picture. Don't know why, I guess they've just felt like doing it, I suppose. So yeah, so they've called this one the Eagle. It's a small batch, 3 casks, bourbon and refill bourbon hoggies, 31154, 312817, 312884, and was bottled at some stage last year. Bottling number 2 is a 9-year-old Glendulan, called the Black Swan, again 46%, 3 casks, again bourbon and refill hoggies, 308284, 310477, 310480, distilled in 2011 and bottled in 2021. Single cask bottling, this is a Glen Spey. It's a 12-year-old, distilled in 2009, bottled last year, cask 803748, bourbon cask, and bottled at 56.8%. Then we're going to move on to 2 of the Cask Finish bottlings. This is a Blair Athol. It is a 13-year-old Blair Athol, finished in an ex-Marsala cask, spent 24 months in the finishing cask, distilled in 2007, bottled last year at 58.2%, cask 3887. The next bottling is a 14-year-old Auchroisk. It is spent, or has spent, or did spend, I should say, 19 months finishing in Oloroso, cask 354547, bottled at 56.1%, distilled in April of 2007 and bottled last year. And the final bottling, a bit of peat, so we're going back to the small batch release. This is the 8-year-old Kalila, which they call the Black Lion. Again, recharred bourbon and refill hoggies. Again, 3 casks, 324399, 328561 and 328569. And I believe this bottling was only for the overseas markets rather than the UK markets. I think they did do a bottling called the Red Line, I think, which was a 9-year-old. Great pub in Norwich called the Red Line, by the way, but anyway, that's beside the point. Anyway, so this I think was just done for European markets and bottled at 46%. So, nice selection, different types and styles, and well, let's just kick off with Benrinnes, shall we? Right, okay, so let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? It's a touch on the raw side. It's got that kind of raw barley character. I suppose you'd call it natural, I suppose. There's a little bit of estuary white fruit in the background. A bit of creamy oak. In actual fact, the oak is really quite coming forward now. It's becoming quite noticeable. I'm also getting an almost kind of rye-like spiciness. And yeah, that oak is certainly coming forward now. Yeah, I mean, it's pleasant, it's a nice nose. Like I said, it's got that sort of a little bit of a rawness to it. I mean, Benrinnes itself can be a bit hit and miss, as we well know. And this is, you know, not a bad selection of casks. Maybe a little bit too much oak for my personal taste, but you know, can't argue with the quality. Let's see what parts are. It's a bit tight, it's a bit tannic, a little bit hot on the finish, grippy, oaky, a lot of oak, which is kind of almost well, it's dominating the sort of the character of the spirit. I mean, it has a little bit of white fruit, a little bit of citrus, possibly some grass. It's bittering quite hard on the finish. And yeah, that oak is just kind of a little bit too heavy for my personal taste. I mean, again, quality not too bad. Yeah, just a shade too heavy. I mean, I don't know how many of the casks I used were refilled. But certainly it seems to me that I would guess that only 1 out of the 3 was probably a refill cask. The other 2 were either probably first fill, or if they weren't first fill, they were very active casks, shall we say. So can't quibble about the quality. I just think the balance was slightly off on that one. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Glendulan. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? That's quite estery, quite aromatic, almost verging on the perfumed. Slightly unusual, I guess, for Glendulan. It's normally a lot more dull than this, so well, that's a good start, isn't it? A little bit of straw, some apricot. Again, there's an edginess, there's a touch of tannin, well, probably a little bit more than a touch of tannin in actual fact. The oak is quite sweet, quite vanilla-y. And again, yeah, okay, it's a pleasant nose. There's a lot of oak, maybe not quite so much oak as on the Benrinnes, but pleasant. I mean, there's a slight edginess in the background, so yeah, overall I think there's a lot to like about this nose. Let's see what the parts are. Finish is quite pleasantly juicy. Opens up with a little bit of that burnt kind of caramel character I often pick up in American whiskies. It's a little bitter as well, certainly on the mid palate and moving into the finish. Again, that slightly burnt caramel note kind of carries on throughout. And again, the balance is just a little bit off for me. I mean, I know that at the end of the day, everybody's palates are different, and you know, when independent bottling companies and blenders and what have you put together blends, you know, they think to them that they've got, you know, the ideal blend, and then it's sort of, you know, obviously up to the individual. We all have different palates, and we all pick up on, you know, different nuances. And again, for me, I can't quibble with the quality of the spirit. I mean, yeah, what's the small batch range kind of tends to sort of sit in and around the sort of mid-40s mark, generally speaking. And you know, so the quality is pretty good, but again, the balance is just a little bit off. It's a little bit too much into the oak end of the spectrum for me, and that oak is a little bit burnt and a little bit too bitter. But you know, overall, I think the quality is certainly pretty good. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Glen Spey. So 12-year-old. I like Glen Spey. I find it to be, again, you know, one of those sort of distilleries that's very consistent in the quality of the spirit it produces. Quite citric, actually. Grapefruit, lime, maybe a touch of tamarind, touch of barley, violet, edgy oak, edgy kind of barley, oaky sort of notes. I mean, that's probably more down to the cask strength alcohol. It's certainly got a nip there. I mean, it's not sort of unbalanced, but there's certainly a noticeable alcohol nip. Doesn't quite have the sort of the honeyed character that I often associate with Glen Spey, but then that could be down to the fact that this is cask strength and that alcohol is just kind of keeping that sort of honeyed richness in check, possibly. We'll obviously stick a little drop of water with it and see whether that actually kind of releases the honey, which it often has a tendency to do. But you know, on this showing, yeah, nose is not too bad at all. Let's see what the palate's like. That's a hit of alcohol on the finish. Edgy, tight, again quite tannic. I get a feeling of kind of suppressed honey. Again, the alcohol is certainly sort of keeping it quite tight. There's quite a pleasant citric sort of grip and nip on the finish. Touch of rye-like spice again. Again, quite a sort of an active American oak cask. I think it just needs a little drop of water, and hopefully putting a little drop of water will kind of open it out, but we shall see. Let's see. Well, it certainly lessens the oak. I don't get quite so much barley. The oak is a little bit more buttery, a bit more vanilla-y. Get a touch of almost burnt caramel. It's almost into that kind of note. So it's kind of lessened the tannic tightness on the nose when it was neat, but it's kind of relaxed it a bit, but I'm certainly not getting the distillery honeyed kind of character. It's now kind of showing more softer, vanilla-y, creamy, buttery kind of oak. See what the palate's like. It's a bit sugary, it's a bit sweet. Again, pretty much like the nose. It's kind of taken that kind of tightness away and it's replaced it with a more rounded, creamy, oaky kind of character. There's a little bit of bitterness on the very end, but not too much. It's okay. Again, it's an obviously very active cask, and I wouldn't say it's had its way with the spirits. That's, you know, the wrong impression to give. But the oak is very, very dominant, and I'm not really getting. There's an element of the distillery character, but not really enough for me, you know. And I can't argue with the quality of it. Can't remember, I don't know what it would have retailed for, but 50, 60 odd quid. And it's, you know, it's good, but I wouldn't feel comfortable trying to sell it at that kind of price, because at the end of the day it's just a shade too much into the oak end of the spectrum again. So but you know, overall can't fault the quality of the spirit. Right, okay, so let's move on to the first of the two cask finishes. Now, as you well know, James Eadie tends to, I wouldn't say specialise in these cask finishes, but they do a number of cask finished bottlings, and I suppose at the end of the day, so far you can just say, well, obviously, you know, they like their oak. Okay, let's see what the nose on this gives us. Okay, it's fairly hefty Marsala notes. It's burnt biscuits, Weetabix, grapey, winey fruit, earth, straw. I don't get a great deal again of the Blair Athol kind of character. There's a sensation of weight. Obviously, sort of Blair Athol does tend to have that weightiness, but certainly neat. It's very much about the cask, and yeah, it's got that, like I say, that sort of tight Weetabixy, sort of burnt biscuity Marsala note. So yeah, again, I think it's another one of those where we'll see what happens when we put a little drop of water with it. Let's see what the pal's like. That's a bit raw, it has to be said. I mean, it's not tearing my throat out, don't get me wrong, but it's I suppose you could say natural. Again, very cask dominated. It's kind of short. There's the finish is quite masked. Again, burnt biscuits, grapey, winey fruit, plenty of tannin, plenty of alcohol. Slightly spicy note right on the finish, but again, that's the alcohol kind of emphasising the sort of spiciness. Really think that's going to need a little drop of water, which I'm going to put in and see if that has softened the nose. Okay, that's actually really nice. It's kind of pushed down the Marsala character. I'm getting you know, some pleasant juicy malty notes, fruit, white fruit, apricot. There's a nice citric note come out now. It's got that sort of tingly citric kind of character. A little bit of white licorice, tangerine, touch of orange. I mean, now that's better. The balance is considerably better once you put a little drop of water with it. It's just not. It's allowed some of the character of the spirit to come through. I like this. I mean, it's got that slightly raw edge, that natural edge to it, which, you know, is, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, I wouldn't quite go as far as saying it's a challenging whiskey, but it's certainly not a kind of sipping session whiskey, shall we say, which is good. Anyway, let's see what the pass on now. pretty much the same as the nose. I mean, yes, the palate displays a fair amount of the Marsala cask still, you know, that sort of biscuity wininess. It's a little bit toastier now, and again I'm getting a sensation of the spirit. I'm getting the sort of the weight of Blair Athol, apricot, a little bit of tangerine, a touch of tannin. The balance is just so much better once you add a little drop of water with it. It just kind of mitigates some of that intense oaky character, and it just perfectly just goes to show the versatility of cask strength bottled whiskies. Yeah, alright, if you want that sort of intensity of cask and alcohol, then you know you can have it. If you want to put a little drop of water with it and just soften it a little bit, you can do. You know, you can't really do that with sort of 40% bottled spirits. I mean, you know, you're almost kind of take it or leave it kind of thing. And it's like I said last week. I mean, the cognac and the Armagnac industry are probably more of a bloody dinosaur than the Scotch whisky industry at the end of the day. You know, being welded to this whole 40% malarkey, when the reality is that they shouldn't be. They should be looking at 46%, well, at least a minimum of 43%, and you know, maybe looking into. I mean, I know there are cognac and Armagnac producers that bottle at cask strength, and you know, it's just what I love about them is the versatility of these kind of spirits. It's a case of, you know, if you want to taste it au natural, as they say, then you can do so. If you want to just sort of tame some of the characteristics of it, you can do so. Brilliant. Yeah, what's not to love about those whiskies? Anyway, but coming back to that, I really liked that. I thought that was really very, very good. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Auchroisk, or Krusk, I think is the exact pronunciation. So yeah, I mean, look at the colour. I mean, it's not a stonking sherry monster. It's not black. So anyway, let's see what the nose gives us. Pretty much like the Marsala finish. It's kind of a bit raw, tannic, grippy Oloroso, dried fruits, spice, raisins. Again, it has that quite a noticeable alcohol prickle. It's 56.1, and it's certainly, you can smell that. It's a little tight. It's juicy, but you feel that juiciness is kind of, again, held in check by the alcohol. Yeah, okay, I can. It's, again, as you well know, the sherry monsters, and this is sort of verging on that kind of end of the spectrum, are not totally my cup of tea, but yeah, I'm not getting any real character of the spirit. But again, hopefully once we put a little drop of water with it, that may well come out. Let's see what the plant's like. Tight, closed, masked. Alcohol more so than the tannins. It's got a little bit of a citric note. It's got a little bit of juicy sherry dried fruits, but that really does need a little drop of water. That's not kind of giving anything away really. A little bit of spice on the aftertaste, but again, alcohol kind of enhanced spiciness. Let's see what the nose is like now. Okay, again, like the Marsala cask, the sherry notes are just kind of pushed down a little bit. I'm getting a little bit of juicy citrus, a little bit of grass maybe, some toasty oak, some barley. Again, nose I think is slightly better balanced. It's still got plenty of sherry character to keep you kind of sherry monster lovers interested, but again I think the balance is on the whole better. See what the palate gives. Still quite heavy on the sherry, but juicier, softer, fruitier, more raisinated fruits, a little bit of barley, a subtle barliness, a little bit of citrus, quite toasty finish, really toasty in actual fact, almost kind of French oak toastiness with that slightly sort of spicy tannin. Yeah, okay, I kind of like that. I can see who it would appeal to. I don't think it's not a total and utter sherry monster, and I think like the Marsala finish, I think a little bit of water just kind of brings the balance more into view. So again, yeah, quite enjoyable. Right, and let's finish off with a little bit of peat. So 8-year-old Kalila. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Classic Kalila, really. I mean, can you go wrong with Kalila? I mean, you know, it is such, again, one of those distilleries that's just so consistent. And, you know, very, very rarely do you come across a poor bottling of Kalila, you know, by anybody at the end of the day. So it's almost kind of, I suppose, money in the bank, really, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of modern Kalila. It's rich, it's heavy, it's fruity, touch of dried fruit, apricot, orange, nice kind of earthy peat, not too heavy peat, balanced. There's some savoury notes kind of coming out now, a little bit of smoke. I mean, that is beautifully balanced. I mean, and like I said, you know, you can't go wrong with Kalila at all. It is just so consistent. And this has got a lovely balance between the sort of the weight of the spirit, you know, some lovely fruit, you know, not hugely peated, good amount of peat to keep, you know, your peat heads interested. And it's just absolutely delightful. Let's see what the puff's like. Soily, earthy, rich, earthy peat. A little bit of bog myrtle, a little bit of just smidge of medicinal notes. Nothing to get too upset about. Salty, really salty on the finish. Salt is kind of building all the time on the palate. A little bit of bittering oak, a little bit of licorice. Slight meatiness on the aftertaste, but again, long, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. I mean, tongue is tingling from the sort of the salt and the alcohol. I mean, that is just supremely balanced, it has to be said. I mean, at the end of the day, we know sort of it's very rare do you find an overly oaky Kalila, mainly because obviously, as you well know, Kalila sort of produces most of its spirit for blends, and the blenders don't want the oak influence. They want the salty kind of peaty character, but not overtly peaty, just to sort of add that element to their blend. And that is pretty damn good, it has to be said. I mean, it's lovely. I'd quite happily drink that. And I have indeed done so. So yeah, lovely way to finish the episode right now. Okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Firstly, a big thank you to James Eadie for the samples for today's episode of the show. You guys' continued support is very much appreciated. The Benrinnes. Yeah, I mean, again, I can't argue with the quality of it. I can argue with the balance. I think it was just a little bit too oaky. Same thing could be said for the Glendulan. Again, you know, it wasn't dull, wasn't, you know, but again, it was a little bit too much heavy oak, and just the balance was just off a shade with regards to that, and to a certain extent the Glen Spey as well. I mean, maybe a tad disappointed by the Glen Spey, because I know how lovely bottlings of Glen Spey can be, and although it wasn't a bad bottling, it wasn't a poor bottling, again it was just that sort of a little bit too much, too much oak, and I think it didn't do the bottling any favours whatsoever. The Blair Athol Marsala finish, and to a certain extent you could say exactly the same thing about the Auchroisk. Both really good bottlings, and it's kind of like, how do you want your poisons, should we say? Do you want full on cask character, then drink it neat. If you want sort of a little bit more balance, a little more subtleness, then obviously put a little drop of water with it. And both of these bottlings just highlight the versatility of cask strength releases. And I just when you taste things like this, all right, yeah, okay, they're not cheap, we know that. It's a 12, 13-year-old whiskey, it's 70 odd quid. I know you're going to go, ooh, but this is the times we live in, and you can't argue with the quality of them, it has to be said. And like I said, I love the flexibility of these kind of bottlings. It's kind of, you pick your poison. And finally, the Kalila. I mean, like I said, you can't kind of go wrong with Kalila. It's all, like I say, it's almost a case of money in the bank. I think I can probably count on one hand the amount of poor bottlings that of Kalila that I've tasted over the years, and I've tasted a hell of a lot of them, that has to be said, because they do crop up quite regularly in the independent sector. So. But yeah, I think overall, I kind of like what James Eadie are doing. I think that, yeah, okay, you can argue about the nuances of particular bottlings, but I think, looking at their selection overall, I think you have to say the quality is pretty damn good. So yeah. There you go. That's this week's episode of the show In the Bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. Next week I will be doing probably some more whiskey, I guess. So until then, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good dramming.